That day, when I finally reached Max on the phone to ask about his wedding date, I got an answer that chilled me to the bone. My daughter-in-law, Lena, looked me straight in the eye and said with a sickeningly sweet smile, "Oh, we already got married yesterday. We only invited special people." The words were a physical blow, like a bucket of ice water being dumped on me. Special people. I, who for 3 years had paid their $$500 monthly rent, bought every stick of furniture in their home, and kept their refrigerator full when they had nothing. I was apparently not special. I stood in my own living room, holding the phone as if it weighed 1,000 pounds, watching my son Max avoid my gaze while Lena settled comfortably onto the very sofa I had purchased for them. The pale pink dress I'd picked out for the ceremony, the new shoes, and the cherished illusion of being part of my only son's most important day, all hung uselessly in my closet. I had spent $200 on that dress, picturing myself smiling proudly in Max's wedding photos, photos I would now never appear in. For weeks, I had planned every detail, putting money aside to give them $$1,000 wedding gift, calling my sister Diana in Chicago with the good news, and cleaning my house from top to bottom in case they came over to celebrate. All of it collapsed instantly with those 4 poisonous words, broken heart, the humiliation, and the lie. Max finally raised his eyes and recited, in a voice that sounded utterly rehearsed, "Mom, it was an intimate thing, very small, just the 2 of us and the witnesses." But I knew it was a lie. I'd already seen the photos on social media. I saw Lena's parents proudly posing with the bride and groom. I saw her siblings toasting with champagne. And I saw Lena's white dress, which I had unknowingly helped finance with the $800 I'd given her last month for her personal expenses. I saw everything I wasn't supposed to see. Telephone receiver. The desperate call. Exactly 7 days after that humiliation, Lena called me, and her voice was completely transformed. She was no longer the confident woman who had so casually excluded me. Now she sounded desperate, almost pleading. "Renata, the rent is overdue. The landlord is pressuring us and says if we don't pay this week, he will kick us out. You forgot to make the transfer." Her voice was trembling, as if the world were ending. That I stayed silent for a few seconds, remembering all the times I had rushed to the bank to make that transfer. All the times I had canceled my own plans to make sure they had a roof over their heads. The countless meals of beans and rice I had eaten so I could give them money for their wants. And now, after they had excluded me from the most important moment of their lives, they had the audacity to call me as if nothing had happened. "Lena," I said with a calm that genuinely surprised me, "didn't I warn you that I only help special people?" The silence on the other end was profound. I could hear my own heart beating. For the first time in years, it was her, not me, who was shaking. "Renata, I don't understand," she stammered. "We were always special to you. You're like a second mom to me." Lies. All lies, wrapped in that sweet voice she only used when she needed something. The same voice she had used to ask me for money for the wedding dress, the honeymoon, and the rings, all of which I had helped finance, never knowing I would be excluded from the ceremony where they were exchanged. For so many years, I'd felt like I was walking on eggshells, weighing every word, every gesture, every gift, just hoping for a crumb of affection from my own son. I had been the perfect mother, the obliging mother-in-law, the silent provider who never protested when they treated me as though I were invisible. But that phrase, "only special people," had awakened something dormant inside me. I mentally calculated how much money I had spent on them in those 3 years. Between the rent, food, gifts, emergencies, and whims, it was over $$20,000. Money I had taken from my retirement, my savings, and the inheritance my late husband had left so I could live my last years in peace. And what was the result? To be treated like a stranger on my own son's wedding day. Angry face. A new dawn. That night, after hanging up, I sat on my bed and cried. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of anger, of accumulated frustration, of years of silently endured humiliation. I cried for all the times they had made me feel that my love was a burden, my presence a hindrance, and my money the only thing I had to offer. I cried for the foolish mother I had been, the woman who had lost herself trying to be indispensable to those who considered her dispensable. When I woke up the next morning, something inside me had fundamentally changed. It wasn't just the pain of betrayal. It was deeper, colder. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. The same tired eyes, the same wrinkles that told stories of years of giving love without receiving it back. But there was a new look in my gaze, a hardness I didn't recognize, a determination that had been buried under years of compliance. I made coffee, as I had every morning for 4 decades, but this time I didn't think about calling Max. I didn't check my phone for an apology. For the first time in a long time, I was my own first concern of the day that I sat at the table, a table that had so often witnessed me planning surprises for them, counting bills for their expenses, and silently crying over their indifference. Now this table would be a witness to something completely different. I took out my checkbook and bank statements and started doing the math. I wanted to see the exact cost of my own foolishness. Monthly rent of $$500 multiplied by 36 months. $$18,000 food and supplies. Approximate $$200 a month. $7,200 gifts, birthdays, Christmas, anniversaries. $$3,000 Lena's medical emergencies. $800 car loan they never repaid. $2,500 air conditioner repair in their apartment. $600 living room furniture. $1,200 $33,400. That was the exact sum of my generosity. $33,400 wasted from my husband's inheritance, my pension, and the savings I had put aside penny by penny over decades of honest work. All that money thrown out the window to keep 2 adults comfortable who couldn't even bother to respect me. Bank cutting the cord, the phone rang and I saw Max's name. Normally my heart would have pounded as I rushed to answer, hoping he would finally apologize. This time I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. It fell silent, and I continued drinking my coffee as if nothing had happened. 10 minutes later Lena called. I ignored that too. Then a text from Max. "Mom, please answer. We need to talk." I deleted the message without replying. At 2 in the afternoon I decided to go for a walk. I hadn't done that in months without a specific errand related to them. It was always the bank for transfers, the supermarket for their supplies, the pharmacy for Lena's medications. Today, I walked simply because I wanted to. I stopped in front of the bank where I had so often made the automatic transfers. The branch manager, Mr. Klein, whom I'd known for years, saw me through the glass and waved. He had processed every one of those transfers, watching my account drain month after month to fill theirs. I went inside and walked directly to his office. "Mr. Klein," I said, "I need to cancel the automatic transfers I have programmed." He looked surprised. For 3 years, those transfers had been as regular as the sunrise. "Are you sure, Mrs. Richter? Did something happen?" His concern was genuine, more genuine than any interest Max had shown in me recently. "What happened is that I finally opened my eyes," I replied. "I want to cancel everything, and I also want information on how to protect my accounts. I don't want anyone else to have access to my money." While Mr. Klein processed the cancellations, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Max, Lena, Max again. It was as if they had a radar to detect when their source of income was in danger. I turned the phone off. Completely. "Mrs. Richter," Mr. Klein said as he handed me the papers. "I apologize for intruding, but in all these years, I have seen you be very generous with your family. I hope you are not being pressured to make these changes." His words touched me deeply. This man, who barely knew me beyond bank transactions, showed more genuine concern for my well-being than my own son. "I'm not being pressured, Mr. Klein. On the contrary, I have finally stopped pressuring myself. When I left the bank, I felt strangely light, as if I had shed an enormous burden. For the first time in years, my money was entirely mine. I had no financial obligations to people who saw me as a resource instead of a person. During the confrontation when I got home, I found 3 cars parked in front of my door. Max's, Lena's, and one I didn't recognize. I could see movement inside my house through the windows. My blood ran cold. They had keys. I had given them keys because I trusted them, because I thought they would one day take care of me just as I had taken care of them. I took a deep breath before opening the door. It was time for the first real confrontation of my new life. I opened the door and saw a scene I'll never forget. Max was sitting on my sofa with his head in his hands, Lena was pacing back and forth like a caged animal, and an older man I didn't know was going through papers on my dining table. My papers, my personal documents. What is happening here? I asked in a voice that was louder than I expected. All three of them looked at me as if I were the intruder in my own house. Lena was the first to speak, her voice thick with that desperate urgency I had heard on the phone. Renata, thank God you're here. We need to talk. Mr. Fisher is from the law firm we consulted about your situation. My situation? I asked, surprisingly calm. What situation? I'm doing perfectly fine. Max finally lifted his head and looked at me, his eyes now reflecting pure financial panic. Mom, we went to the bank, and they told us you canceled all the transfers. Mr. Klein explained that you also blocked our access to your accounts. We don't understand why you did that. Mr. Fisher, a man in his 50s in a gray suit with a smile that didn't inspire confidence, approached me with an outstretched hand. Mrs. Richter, I am Dr. Fisher, a family law attorney. Your children are concerned about your mental well-being, and have asked me to assess the situation. I didn't shake his hand. Instead, I went straight to my dining table and collected all the documents he had been reviewing without my permission. These are my private papers. You have no right to look at them without my consent. Mom, Max interjected with that condescending voice he'd perfected. We're worried about you. Your behavior has been very strange lately. First, you financially cut us off without an explanation. Then you don't answer our calls. We think you might need professional help. Lena approached and tried to take my hand with that fake tenderness she reserved for moments when she needed something. Renata, honey, we know you're under a lot of stress. Maybe the loneliness is affecting you more than you think. At your age, episodes of confusion are normal. The word confusion echoed in my head like an alarm bell. Now I understood why they had brought the lawyer. It wasn't about helping me. It was about having me declared mentally incompetent and seizing control of my finances. The same woman who had excluded me from her wedding was now treating me like a senile old lady. I am not confused, I said with a firmness that silenced everyone. I am clearer than I have been in years, and you are going to leave my house right now. Stop, sign the final stand, Mr. Fisher interjected with that professional voice lawyers used to sound reasonable. Mrs. Richter, I understand you feel overwhelmed, but your children have a right to intervene if they believe your ability to make financial decisions is impaired. They have documented several concerning behaviors. Concerning behaviors? The laugh that came from my throat was hoarse, almost cruel. Like what? Deciding that my money belongs to me? Deciding to no longer finance the lives of two adults who treat me like trash. Lena jumped up as if I had slapped her. We never treated you badly. You are part of our family. Everything you have will belong to us one day anyway. We are just speeding up the process. There was the naked, unvarnished truth. Everything I had would one day belong to them. In their minds, I was already dead, and they were simply collecting their inheritance in advance. It didn't matter if I had 70 years or 70 days left. To them, I was just an ATM with legs that had become problematic. Out, I said, pointing to the door. All three of you get out of my house. Max stood up with that angry, childish face he made when he didn't get his way. Mom, we can't just leave. We have obligations. The rent, the car payments, the credit card you co-signed for. You can't just cut us off from one day to the next. I can't. My voice rose for the first time in the entire conversation. Who says I can't? For years, I have paid rent that wasn't even in my name. I filled a refrigerator in a house where I was not welcome. I financed a life that clearly had no place for me. Mr. Fisher took a folder from his briefcase. Mrs. Richter, we have prepared some documents that could facilitate this transition. A power of attorney that would allow Max and Lena to manage your finances more efficiently. This would just be temporary until you feel better. I took the folder and without even opening it, threw it directly into the trash can. The only transition that is going to happen here is yours to the front door. Lena started to cry, but they were tears of frustration, of contained rage. You can't do this to us, Renata. We were counting on you. We made plans based on your support. We bought things. We took on financial obligations because we knew we could count on you. Obligations based on my money, I replied. Not on my well-being, not on my happiness, not on my company, just on my money. And now that I have decided that my money is better used in my own life, I am suddenly a confused old woman who needs legal guardianship. Mr. Fisher packed his papers. Mrs. Richter, this is not over. Your family has legal options. If you are indeed making irrational decisions due to mental health problems, a judge can determine that you need guardianship. His words felt like a blow. This was not just a manipulative family visit. It was a real legal threat. Mr. Fisher, I said, looking him directly in the eyes, I suggest you do your research thoroughly before you threaten a 71-year-old woman who has managed her finances flawlessly for 40 years, who raised her son alone after the death of her husband, who ran a household and worked honorably until retirement, and who until last week financially supported two completely capable adults. Lena stopped crying and looked at me with a coldness that finally showed her true face. This won't stay like this, Renata. We have rights and lawyers too. Perfect, I replied. Hire all the lawyers you want. With your own money, of course, because mine is no longer available to finance your legal tantrums. The three of them walked toward the door with the wounded dignity of people who aren't used to being told no. Before stepping out, Max turned to me one last time. Mom, this is going to end very badly for you. You're going to end up alone, with no one to take care of you when you really need it. Max, I said with deep sadness, but also with crystalline clarity. I am already alone. The difference is that now it's by my own choice, not by your neglect. As I closed the door behind them, I stood in my living room, surrounded by the most beautiful silence I had heard in years. It was the silence of freedom. Shield preparing for war. That night I couldn't sleep, but it wasn't due to sadness or regret. It was the adrenaline rush of having reclaimed control of my own life. I lay awake, planning my next steps like a general preparing for battle. If Max and Lena wanted a fight, I would give them a war, but it would be a war fought with intelligence, not emotion. At 6 in the morning, I was dressed and ready to go. My first stop was the office of attorney Mr. Weber, a man with an impeccable reputation whom I had met years ago while handling my husband's will, and who specialized in protecting the rights of the elderly. Mrs. Richter, he told me after I explained the situation, what your children tried to do yesterday is more common than you think. It's called elder financial abuse, and it's a federal crime. The fact that they entered your house without permission and reviewed your private documents also constitutes a violation. His words both calmed and worried me. They calmed me because they confirmed I wasn't crazy. What had happened was truly abusive. They worried me because I realized the situation was more serious than I had initially thought. We have to document everything, Mr. Weber continued. Every transfer, every gift, every time they pressured you for money. We will also change your will to protect your assets from future manipulation attempts. We spent 3 hours reviewing my financial records. Mr. Weber whistled when he saw the total sum. $33,400 in 3 years. Mrs. Richter, with this money, you could have lived comfortably, traveled, and enjoyed your retirement. Instead, you completely financed the lives of 2 adults who didn't even respect you enough to invite you to their wedding. When I left his office, I had a complete plan. Change all the locks on my house. Install a security system with cameras to protect against future surprise visits. Open a new bank account at a different bank where they had no contact. Start living the life I had postponed for years. My next stop was the hardware store. The owner, Mr. Summer, had known me for years because I was always buying things to fix Max and Lena's apartment. Mrs. Richter, what brings you here today? Another emergency with your son? He asked. No, Mr. Summer. This time it's for my own house. I need to change all the locks, and I want them to be of the best quality. He looked surprised but asked no questions. While I was choosing the locks, his son Ethan, who installed security systems, came by. It was Providence in action. Ethan, I told him, I also need surveillance cameras installed, the complete system. The price is not an issue. Prohibited an end to the manipulation. While they were preparing everything for the installation the next day, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Lena, calling from someone else's phone because I had blocked her number. Renata, it's Lena. Please don't hang up. We need to talk like civilized adults. Speak, I said dryly. Listen, I understand you're upset about the wedding. It was a mistake. Max and I have talked about it and we want to make it up to you. How about we have a special dinner to celebrate our wedding with you? We can do it at your house. Cook together like we used to. The manipulation in her words was so obvious that I almost laughed. Lena, how much rent do you owe exactly? The silence confirmed I had hit a nerve. Well, it's 2 months. $1,000 total. But I'm not just calling for that, Renata. We really miss you in our lives. Do you miss me or my money? I asked directly. Both, she replied with a surprising honesty. Renata, I won't lie to you. Yes, we need your financial help, but we love you too. You're important to us. If I'm so important, I said, why wasn't I important enough to be at your wedding? Why am I not important enough to get a call that doesn't ask for money? When was the last time you called me just to ask how I was doing? Another silence. We both knew the answer, never. Lena, I'm only going to explain this to you once. For 3 years you have treated me like an ATM with feelings. You used me. You ignored me. You humiliated me. And finally, you insulted me in the worst possible way. Now that the money is running out, you suddenly discover you love me. Renata, please. I cut her off. There is no please. You made your choice when you decided I wasn't special enough to be at your wedding. Now I'm making mine. I hung up and turned the phone off completely. I wanted no more interruptions on my day of liberation. Nail polish, the first taste of freedom. That afternoon, I went to the beauty salon I hadn't visited in over a year. I always canceled my appointments because Max or Lena needed something urgent, or because the money I had set aside for myself became an emergency for them. Mrs. Richter, my favorite hairstylist, Cynthia, called out. What a surprise. I thought you had forgotten us. I didn't forget you, Cynthia. I just forgot that I also deserve to be pampered. I treated myself to the full treatment. Cut, color, manicure, pedicure. For the first time in years, I spent money on myself without feeling guilty. You look beautiful, Mrs. Richter, Cynthia said when she was done. But more than that, you look free. Did something good happen? Yes, Cynthia. I finally learned to say no. House with garden, a new neighbor, a new hope. When I got home, there was a car I didn't recognize in front of my door, and an older woman sitting on the steps of my porch. Mrs. Richter? She asked as I got out of the car. Yes, that's me. Can I help you? I'm Eleanor Brooks. I live next door. We've been neighbors for years, but we've never had a chance to talk. Yesterday, I heard very loud voices in your house and I got worried. Is everything okay? Her sincere concern touched me deeply. Here was a stranger who showed more interest in my well-being than my own son. Come in, Mrs. Brooks. I'll make you a coffee, and I'll tell you a story you won't believe. Eleanor listened to my entire story without interrupting. When I finished, her eyes were filled with tears. Mrs. Richter, she said, you did the right thing. I went through something similar with my daughter 5 years ago. I also thought it was my duty to finance her adult life. I also believed they wouldn't love me if I didn't give them money. What happened? I cut off the money when I realized they only called me when they needed something. First, it was terrible. They threatened me, emotionally blackmailed me, tried to make me feel guilty. But after 6 months, my daughter called to genuinely apologize. Now we have a real relationship, based on love, not on money. Her words gave me hope. Do you think Max and Lena will understand one day? Maybe yes, maybe no, she answered honestly. But that's no longer your responsibility, Mrs. Richter. Your responsibility now is to live your own life. That night, for the first time in 3 years, I went to bed without worrying about Max and Lena's rent, food, or whims. I went to bed thinking about myself, my plans, and my future, and I slept better than I had in years. Police car light the restraining order. The next day, Ethan and Mr. Summer arrived to change the locks and install the security system. While they worked, my phone kept ringing from unknown numbers. Lena was still trying to contact me. Mrs. Richter, Ethan said, finishing the camera installation. This system will give you absolute peace of mind. You can see from your phone who is coming to your house even when you're not here. And if someone breaks in without permission, an alert is automatically sent to the police. The irony was heavy. I was installing security to protect myself from my own son, but it was a practical measure to maintain my newfound peace. I decided to call my sister Diana in Chicago. We had lost touch because every time we spoke, I would detail Max and Lena's successes and how much money I'd spent on them. I now realized our conversations had become financial reports disguised as family news. Renata. Diana answered, surprised. Sister, how are you? We haven't spoken in months. I'm good, Diana. Better than good. I'm calling you to tell you that I've finally come to my senses. I told her the whole story. Renata, sister, it was about time, she said. Every time we spoke, it broke my heart to hear you brag about how much money you gave them, as if love could be measured in dollars. I wanted to tell you something, but I didn't know how. What did you want to tell me? That Max never spoke lovingly about you when I saw him at family gatherings. It was always, my mom helped me with this or my mom bought me that, but never, I miss my mom or I love my mom. It was as if you were a service provider, not a person. Her words hurt, but it was a necessary pain. You know what else I noticed? Diana continued. Lena always spoke about you in the future tense. When Renata is no longer here, we can remodel her house, or, when we inherit, we will invest in the business. As if they were waiting for you to die to really live. This revelation hit me like a bucket of ice water. They didn't just see me as an ATM. They saw me as a temporary obstacle between them and their money. Facing the past. Later that day, Eleanor brought me coffee and we talked again. She gave me comfort and confirmed my decision by sharing how her daughter eventually had to work and respect her. That afternoon, I decided to do something I had postponed for years. Visit my husband's grave. Robert, my love, I think I lost myself for a while, I whispered, sitting on the grass next to his headstone. After you left, I put all my energy into Max. I wanted to be the best mother, thinking somehow he would grow up without a father, but I think in the process I forgot to be myself. The money you left for me to live peacefully, I spent it taking care of them. But not anymore, my love. I have learned. Stop. Sign the final warning. When I got home, there were 3 cars parked in front of my door again. My heart raced, but this time I was prepared. The camera showed Max, Lena, and 2 other agitated people. I didn't get out of my car. Instead, I called Mr. Weber. Mr. Weber, they are at my house again. This time they've brought more people. Don't get out of the car, Mrs. Richter. I'll be there right away and I'll call the police. After our conversation yesterday, I requested a temporary restraining order. They are not allowed to be on your property. Minutes later, Mr. Weber and 2 police patrol cars arrived. I watched the officers talk to Max and Lena. One of the officers approached my car. Ma'am, you can get out safely. Your visitors are going to leave immediately. As I got out, Max shouted from the street. Mom, this is ridiculous. We're your family. You can't call the police on your own son. Max, I replied with surprising calm. Family doesn't threaten lawsuits for mental incompetence. Family doesn't break into people's homes without permission. Family doesn't treat their mothers like ATMs. Lena screamed. You're going to pay us everything you owe us. We have bills you co-signed for. You can't just abandon us like this. Mr. Weber interjected. Mrs. Brooks, any future communication must be through my office, and I suggest you consult with an attorney before making collection threats, because my client has full documentation of all the payments she voluntarily made for 3 years. I watched them drive away, defeated, but not giving up. I knew this wasn't over, but for the first time I felt confident. I had professional help, emotional support, and mental clarity. Magnifying glass tilted. Right, the next escalation. The next few days were strangely peaceful. The surveillance camera showed Max and Lena driving past my house several times a day. Mr. Weber had advised me to document every one of these visits to strengthen the case for a permanent restraining order. On Friday morning, while I was calmly having breakfast, the doorbell rang. The camera showed a very well-dressed young woman with a professional smile. Good morning, Mrs. Renata Richter, she said as I opened the door. I am a social investigator from the Office of Senior Services. We have received a report that you may be in an at-risk situation, and we need to conduct a wellness check. My blood ran cold. Max and Lena had escalated the situation. It was no longer just threats from private lawyers. Now they had involved the government. Can I see your ID? I asked, trying to stay calm. Of course. She showed me an official ID. I am social worker Mrs. Schmidt. Can I come in and talk to you? I let her in, knowing that refusing would only be worse for my case. Mrs. Schmidt sat down in my living room and pulled a form from her folder. Mrs. Richter, we have received reports that you have shown significant changes in your financial behavior ***. that you have cut off communication with your family, and that you have shown signs of paranoia by installing unnecessary security systems. We were also told that you have refused medical and legal help from your loved ones. Every word was carefully chosen to make me sound like a mentally disturbed old woman. I instantly recognized Lena's handiwork in the wording. She had always been skilled at manipulating language. "Miss Schmidt," I said, trying to maintain my dignity, "I would like to call my lawyer before answering any questions." "Ma'am, this is not a legal interrogation. It's a wellness check. If you have nothing to hide, it shouldn't be a problem to speak with me." The phrase, "if you have nothing to hide," infuriated me. It was the same logic abusers used to justify their invasions. "Miss, I'm calling my lawyer. You can wait here or come back another day. But I will not answer any questions without legal representation present." I called Mr. Weber, and he arrived within 20 minutes. When he saw the social worker, his expression hardened. "Miss Schmidt," he said after checking her ID, "I hope you have a court order to be here, because my client is under my legal representation, and any unauthorized investigation constitutes harassment." "Sir," Mrs. Schmidt replied, with less confidence than before, "we have reports from concerned family members about the lady's well-being. It's our duty to investigate." "What family?" Mr. Weber asked dryly. "The same family that tried to get her to sign a power of attorney without representation? The same family that broke into her house without permission and checked her private documents? The same family that excluded her from important events while living off her money." Mr. Weber placed a folder on the table. "Here I have complete documentation of my client's financial and emotional abuse. $$33, $400 was withdrawn from her accounts in 3 years. Systematic social exclusion and emotional blackmail. If someone needs to be investigated here, it is not my client." Mrs. Schmidt reviewed the documents with growing discomfort. It was obvious that the information she had been given did not match the reality in front of her. "Mrs. Richter," she finally said, "can you explain to me why you so abruptly stopped financial support for your son?" "Because I finally discovered they were using me," I replied simply. "Because I realized that to them I wasn't a mother but a bank account. Because I was tired of financing the lives of people who saw me as an obstacle." "But don't you feel it's your responsibility to help your family?" The question outraged me. "Miss Schmidt, my responsibility as a mother was to raise my son until he was 18, to educate him, and to give him the tools to be an independent adult. My son is 35 years old, married, and perfectly capable of supporting himself. Financing his adult life is not my responsibility. It is my choice, and I have chosen not to do so anymore." Mr. Weber interjected. "Miss Schmidt, would you consider it normal for a 35-year-old adult to be unable to pay his own rent without the help of his 71-year-old mother?" Mrs. Schmidt didn't answer right away. I could see she was reevaluating the entire situation. "Mrs. Richter," she asked after a moment, "do you manage your own finances completely? I can show you my bank statements, my investments, my tax payments. Everything is current and in order. Do you live independently? As you can see, I keep my house clean. I take care of myself physically. I drive my own car. I have healthy social relationships with my neighbors. Do you take any medication?" "Just vitamins and occasionally aspirin. I don't have any medical conditions that require medication," Mr. Weber added. "My client has just undergone extensive medical exams as part of our legal process. She is in perfect mental and physical condition." Mrs. Schmidt closed her folder. "Mrs. Richter, based on this conversation and the documentation I have reviewed, I see no indication that you are at risk or in need of intervention. I will close this case." Stop signed the incompetence lawsuit. After she left, Mr. Weber and I remained silent for a few minutes. "Renata," he said finally, "this is going to continue to escalate. Max and Lena are spending money. They don't have to hire professionals to try to have you declared incompetent. Does that mean they are desperate?" "It means exactly that. What else can they do? They can file a lawsuit for incompetence. It's expensive and hard to win. But if they find a sympathetic judge and a psychiatrist willing to testify in their favor, they could get a guardian assigned. The thought terrified me. They could take control of my money. They could try, but we have solid evidence that you are completely competent and that they are motivated by greed, not by genuine concern. We are going to fight this. That afternoon, I called Diana to vent. Sister, she said, do you notice how far they are willing to go for money? They are risking family relationships, spending money on lawyers and doctors, destroying their own reputation, all to get access to your bank account again. Her words made me realize there was no going back. Max and Lena had completely revealed their true nature. To them, I had never been a mother or a respected mother-in-law. I had always just been money on legs. This revelation, though painful, was also liberating. I no longer had to feel guilty for protecting myself. That evening, Eleanor invited her friends from the garden club to meet me. Renata, she introduced me. These are my friends Cynthia, Maria, Carmen, and Alfreda. We have all been through similar situations with abusive family members. We spent the evening sharing stories. What hurts me the most, I confessed, is not losing the money I gave them, but realizing that I never had the love I thought I had. Renata, Alfreda said with the wisdom of her 80 years, true love cannot be bought or sold. If you had to pay for it, it was never real. Her words were balm for my wounded soul. I had bought attention, not love. You know what I've discovered? I said to my new friends. That loneliness surrounded by people who don't love you is worse than being lonely on your own. At least now when I am alone, I am in good company. We all laughed and toasted to our newfound wisdom. At a month later, I thought I had finally won. I had settled into a beautiful routine, tending my garden, having lunch with friends, and painting again. But on a Thursday morning, Mr. Weber came to my house with a grim expression. Renata, we need to talk. Max and Lena have filed a formal lawsuit for mental incompetence in family court. They are requesting to have a legal guardian assigned to you. The words fell on me like stones. Does that mean they can take control of my money? If a judge determines that you are unable to manage your affairs, yes, he could place Max as your legal guardian, which would give him full control over your finances. My own son was trying to legally declare me incompetent to steal my money. What evidence could they have? You yourself have seen that I am completely competent. They have statements from 3 witnesses who claim you have behaved erratically. They also submitted unpaid doctor's bills that you supposedly didn't pay and medications that you supposedly hoarded without taking them. But that's a lie. I know, Renata, but they have fabricated convincing evidence. They also have the statement from Dr. Lehman, who states that you refused to cooperate with a psychiatric evaluation, which they interpret as proof of mental decline. The manipulation was diabolical. They had turned my refusal to undergo an unnecessary exam into proof of a mental illness. The 3 witnesses were Lena, a hostile neighbor named Mr. Davis, and someone who claimed to be my pharmacist, Mr. Green. Magnifying glass tilted right, unmasking the deception. We went to the pharmacy together that afternoon. Mr. Green, my pharmacist, was surprised and nervous to see me. Mrs. Richter, I was told you signed a statement saying I show erratic behavior with my medications. His face turned red. Mrs. Richter, your daughter-in-law came in a few weeks ago and asked about your medications. She said she was worried because you were acting strangely. I explained to her that you only buy vitamins and occasional aspirin, that you don't have any regular medical prescriptions. But she insisted that this was proof that you weren't taking adequate care of your health. Did you sign a paper? Mr. Weber interjected. She brought a document that said I was confirming that Mrs. Richter had irregular medication purchases. I thought it was for her health insurance or something. I didn't know it was for a lawsuit. I'm terribly sorry for this misunderstanding. Next, we confronted Mr. Davis, the neighbor, who received us with obvious hostility. He claimed I was crazy for installing cameras and yelling at my family. I realized he had taken everything out of context. Mr. Davis, do you know why I installed the cameras? No, and I don't care. To protect myself from my son and daughter-in-law, who broke into my house without permission and threatened me. That's what a crazy person would say, he replied cruelly. There was no reasoning with him. Balance scale the fight for dignity. That evening, Mr. Weber and I planned our defense. Renata, we need our own psychiatric evaluation. I have a colleague, Dr. Moore, who is an expert in assessing mental capacity. She can officially confirm that you are completely competent. The next day, I went to my appointment with Dr. Moore. For 2 hours, she asked me questions about my memory, reasoning, financial understanding, and emotional health. She also gave me cognitive tests. Mrs. Richter, she said at the end, your results are well above average for your age. You are not only mentally competent, but your cognitive function is excellent. Based on what you've told me and the documents I've reviewed, this seems to be a classic case of elder financial exploitation. That afternoon, Eleanor organized an emergency meeting with the Garden Club. When I told them about the lawsuit, everyone was outraged. Renata, we will testify in your favor, Maria said. You are clearer and stronger than many 40-year-old women I know, Cynthia added. Renata, my dear, Alfreda told me, what your children are doing is nothing new. But you have something many of these victims didn't have. Documentation, legal support, and friends who can testify for you. That night, for the first time since this nightmare began, I really cried, not out of sadness but out of grief. I said my final goodbye to the son I thought I had. But an iron determination emerged within me not to let myself be stripped of my money, my dignity, or my freedom. The war had officially begun, and I was ready to fight. Classical building victory in court. The trial came 3 weeks later. I put on my best black suit and looked at myself in the mirror. Today, not only my mental capacity would be judged, but my dignity as a person. That I in the hallway, I saw Max and Lena. Lena held my gaze with a coldness that confirmed this was just a business transaction for her. Their lawyer began his opening statement, portraying me as a confused old woman who had been manipulated by strangers to alienate me from my loving family. Lena was the first to testify, delivering an Oscar-worthy performance, crying as she described my supposed mental decline. But when Mr. Weber cross-examined her, the cracks appeared. Mrs. Schuster, can you tell the court when was the last time you called my client without asking for money? Is it true that when my client asked about the wedding, you told her that you had only invited special people? Lena's face turned red, and she couldn't answer convincingly. Max was next. Seeing him swear to tell the truth while preparing to lie about my mental health was one of the most painful moments of my life. The mask fell when Mr. Weber questioned him. Mr. Richter, how much money have you received from your mother in the last 3 years? Does $$33, $400 sound about right? Do you, at 35 years old, need the help of your 71-year-old mother to pay your rent? Max couldn't answer with dignity. Then it was our turn. Mr. Green, the pharmacist, exposed Lena's manipulation. Dr. Moore testified about my excellent mental state. My new friends testified about my clarity and vitality. Finally, it was my turn. I stood up with dignity. Mr. Weber guided me through my testimony, letting me tell the whole story. Mrs. Richter, Mr. Weber finally asked, why did you decide to stop financial support for your son and daughter-in-law? Because I finally understood that what I was getting from them was not love. I replied in a clear, loud voice. It was a commercial transaction disguised as a family relationship. My money was welcome, but I as a person was not. Do you regret your decision? I only regret that it took me so long to make it. Judge Miller retired to deliberate. When he came back, his expression was serious. After reviewing all the evidence presented, he began, it is obvious to this court that Mrs. Renata Richter is in full possession of her mental faculties. Furthermore, the evidence suggests that this lawsuit is motivated by financial interest rather than by genuine concern for Mrs. Richter's well-being. The court completely denies the request for guardianship. I had won. I had not only won the lawsuit but my freedom, my dignity, and my right to live free from abuse. When we left the courthouse, Lena gave me a look of pure hatred. Max looked at me one last time, and for a second I saw something that could have been regret, but it was already too late. Sparkles the new life. That night, Eleanor organized a celebration. Renata, Alfreda told me, today you didn't just win a trial. You won back your life. She was right. For the first time in years, the future was completely mine. 3 months later, I sold my house and moved to a beautiful apartment near the city center. I donated half of my money to organizations that protect the elderly from family abuse. With the other half, I began to live the life I had always wanted. I traveled through Europe, took art classes, and joined volunteer groups. I never heard from Max and Lena again. I heard from others that they had to move to a smaller apartment, and that Lena had found a job for the first time in years. Perhaps the adversity would teach them what my generosity never could. The value of honest work and independence. Some nights, when I look at the stars from my new balcony, I think about the woman I was a year ago, fearful, manipulated, believing I had to buy love. That woman is dead. And in her place, someone has been born who has understood a fundamental truth. True love never has a price, and freedom is never too expensive. My name is Renata. I am 72 years old, and I have finally learned that the most important person I have to love and protect is myself.